gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's May the 1st, 2023. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, with the mustachioed Stephen Wagner this morning as we break down the news of the day. I used to have one of those. Got rid of it quite a while ago. But as we break down the news of the day, and Stephen, I think I'm going to start with a little transfer portal conversation this morning. Although first, I have to give a shout out to both the Miami Heat and the Florida Panthers for all the thrills that they provided the South Florida sports fan in recent days. A much needed injection of happiness, without question. And man, the Panthers going and beating Boston in Game 7 on the road. My God, I mean, I'm still exhausted from watching that this morning. And then the Heat going into New York and beating the Knicks. Just some great things going on in South Florida for the sports fan. But shifting over to the transfer portal, I'm not sure yet that there's great things going on in either direction. And I want to talk about that a little bit this morning. First of all, let's talk about guys that are current Miami Hurricanes that went into the transfer portal. And I honestly was expecting 6, 7, 8 of them, Stephen. Instead, it ended up really being 3, and that's if you include Khalil Brantley, who declared many weeks ago that he would be going into the portal. Joined by Jabari Ishmael, which made total sense, has never been able to play at Miami because of injuries, and the same for Thomas Davis, who's never been able to come close to sniffing the field and playing because of his own injuries as well. So why is that a bad thing? Well, it's a bad thing because it affects how many spots are now open to bring in players out of the transfer portal. And we had a story on the website yesterday about a junior college offensive lineman that Miami's been recruiting that they would like to add to the recruiting class. But his offer apparently was contingent on them having spots in the portal. So there's a lot of personnel juggling going on right now in Coral Gables, Stephen. And, I know you've been primarily focused on traditional recruiting while Matt and I grind on the transfer portal side of things. But this has not played out even close to the way we expected in a lot of different ways. The ones I just mentioned, plus last year when Miami went after transfers, things happened very, very quickly. And the players committed, they got their NIL deals, they went into the fold, not just in football, but in basketball also. This year, it's playing out totally differently. Neither football or basketball has signed a transfer yet. So this is really kind of bizarre. From your perspective, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think like you, I expected a lot more to happen sooner, really on both sides of the transfer portal. Excuse me, still trying to clear my throat after I screamed my lungs out at a bar last night watching the Panthers game. But yeah, I really expected a lot more to be happening on both sides of the transfer portal. I expected Miami to be much more involved in going after guys. I mean, we know that they're after Xavier Henderson and Jaden Davis. And I expected maybe a few more Miami kids to go ahead and enter their name in the transfer portal. Now, obviously, from the Miami side of things, having these guys be willing to say, yeah, no, I want to stay. I want to make Miami my home. I'm good where I'm at. I mean, that's always going to be a positive whenever you have guys who are invested in the program, who are committed to the program, and who are enthused enough to say, yeah, this is where I want to be. That's always going to be a positive. But I definitely expected Miami to maybe be a little bit more aggressive in dipping into the portal and finding some of these guys with other a lot like other programs who are quite frankly rebuilding. I mean, we've seen a lot of rebuilding programs across the country. Colorado is a big program that comes to mind, and I'm aware they're a little bit of an outlier. But a lot of these programs who have been really, really invested in going to the transfer portal to fill position needs and going quickly. I've seen a lot of guys in our message boards say, hey, I'm a little bit concerned about where we're at with the transfer portal, because it's not that they're not engaged in the transfer portal. It's that a lot of these top names in the portal are going to go very quickly. They're going to go to other schools that aren't Miami. And we know that as far as the transfer portal goes, Miami can dip into the portal anytime that they want. The deadline, so the entry window for the actual portal, that's the window that players are able to actually put their name in. Miami does not have to sign a player from the portal within this window. Miami can sign this player whenever they want, so long as it aligns with the academic calendar and the player is actually able to enroll in the University of Miami, so there aren't any issues there. But I do understand kind of the concern of, hey, a lot of the top names in the portal, they're going to go quickly. And so I think on that hand, I was a little bit surprised to see Miami wasn't aggressively involved far earlier. I definitely thought they were going to be a little bit more involved at receiver, and they were going to be a little bit more aggressive in going after some of these receivers who put their name in the portal. Like we said, we know they're after Xavier Henderson, receiver from Florida, who obviously has talent that they see. But definitely, again, like I keep saying, thought they would be a little bit more involved than maybe just Jaden Davis and Xavier Henderson.
All right, let's break these categories down one by one, Stephen. And I'm the first to admit, I thought that there would be more guys that would go in the portal than ended up going. I mean, Ishmael and Davis made total sense. I expected them to go. They did. But there were other guys that I thought might join them, and I was expecting at least 5 or 6. And I was thinking like guys like Michael Redding, wide receiver. I think even Frank Latson might have been able to go back in the portal and gotten permission from the NCAA to play right away. So I was thinking about him. I was thinking about Malik Curtis, another guy that just hasn't been able to really crack the line. Like Dom Mammarelli, the tight end, that very clearly is not very likely to play at Miami. That's just a few more that I thought would go in. But they chose to put their education first and stay at Miami and get their degrees. And so what that has done is shrink the pool for Miami to go after guys. Now, you mentioned Jaden Davis, the cornerback from Oklahoma, and you mentioned Xavier Henderson, the receiver from Florida. Those two remain very much in play for Miami, even though they have not committed to this point. I think Miami will land at least one, if not both, of those two guys. So keep an eye on that here in the coming days. They've both visited last week, so they got to be getting pretty close to decisions. And I think I would think like maybe this coming week we'll see some stuff happening with those two. But one of the things that we have on the website this morning is we take a look at, with the transfer portal window closed, where the Hurricanes go from here. And we go kind of like position by position at the guys that we believe they are looking at here as they go forward now, knowing exactly what their number is. And I think, Stephen, that there's going to start being some visits here very, very soon, more than the two that have already taken place. The Canes, we believe, will be in the market for one running back. Now, Houston transfer Alton McCaskill is one that has been mentioned. He missed last year injured, but the prior season under Coach Dawson at Houston, he had 961 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. So Dawson knows McCaskill very well. We think he could come into more serious play going forward, with the caveat being the numbers, I think, are tighter than Mario Cristobal anticipated for them to be. So they are going to have to be more selective about who they take. Another running back that's out there is a kid from Notre Dame, Logan Diggs. He had 820 yards last season, so that's a decent running back there. So other schools are involved with him. We don't know yet whether he will be involved with Miami moving forward, but that is a name just to keep an eye on. We mentioned Henderson at wide receiver. As a fallback, Miami has been talking to Texas San Antonio transfer Zachary Franklin. He had 93 catches for 1,137 yards and 15 touchdowns last season, Stephen. So I think one of those two guys would certainly fill the need at receiver.
I am higher on Franklin than a lot of guys probably are. So at my previous posting before I got here, I actually had the chance to see Franklin play a couple of times. And I got to tell you, I really do like him. He's productive. You put him in a system, the system that UTSA runs under Jeff Traylor, it's not necessarily numbers oriented, it's production oriented. Screw whatever stats you may end up with. If this offense, if this defense is able to produce, then the stats are going to fall wherever they do. And Franklin is that type of receiver. I really like this kid a lot more than a lot of guys do. I mean, I felt like
you're saying don't sweat Henderson. If Franklin ends up being the guy they go after, it's okay.
I truly do think that. I really, really like Franklin a lot. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like Henderson, he obviously has talent that Miami sees. And I know a lot of fans are going to go, yeah, well, he's a Power 5 guy. We want guys that are coming from Power 5 schools. Well, the way that I kind of want to look at this is if you're transferring from a Power 5 school to another school, the odds are, at best, this is going to be a lateral move. And that's kind of probably the way that we're going to see Florida and Miami. If you're going from a school that has the prestige of Florida to the prestige of Miami, that's pretty lateral. If you're going from a school like UTSA to Miami, that's an upward move. And that, to me, says a lot about the ability that this kid has. He had success at a group of 5 school that had some success that's really had some success the last 2 years. I believe they've been ranked in the AP top 25 the last 2 years, and they've had a very efficient and effective passing offense featuring Franklin the last 2 years. You see him making an upward move to a school like Miami. This tells me, hey, this kid's been in the minor leagues. He's ready to play big league ball now. Let's put him in the ACC. Let's line him up with corners from Florida State, from Clemson, from Texas A&M, who Miami's going to play before ACC play starts. Let's get this guy on the field. Franklin is a guy that I really like a lot. Yes, Henderson has talent, but I think Franklin would be kind of a little bit of an under the radar name to really keep an eye on. I personally am really high on this kid.
So let's let the cat out of the bag. We did hire you from the weeds of San Antonio. So you might be a little biased there about that UTSA, connection with Franklin. So we'll throw that qualifier out there. But his stats are great. He clearly is a good prospect. So if Henderson goes in another direction, which he could, Miami would probably look there for another receiver. But, again, everything that we're saying right now is with the qualifier of the numbers, because I don't believe they have the numbers that they expected to have going into the portal. Offensive line, Stephen, we had a story on the website yesterday. It's still there for those that missed it. This one came out of nowhere, okay? A junior college, Coffeyville, Kansas Community College, 290-pound guard, Amory Wiggins. He's available to enroll now, and Miami was his first Power 5 offer. The coaches have told him that if they can make room for him, which they expect, that they will add him to the program, and he would join the Hurricanes, we believe, immediately for summer camp. So not sure what's going to happen there now with, again, the limited spots, but that's one to keep an eye on, and we have a story on that on the website today. Defensive lineman, Miami's been pursuing defensive tackle Tywone Malone out of Mississippi. Mario Cristobal recruited him out of high school when he was at Oregon. Ohio State is also making a play for Malone, which kind of complicated things for Miami because it was looking like Miami was doing really, really well there, Stephen. And they really, really, really need to add an impactful defensive tackle. And Malone is a two-sport kid. He plays baseball. Also, he's extremely athletic. He would fit the bill. And there's also a defensive tackle out of Louisiana Tech, Kyvie Rose, who's on Miami's radar, and the Canes have offered him. He's bigger than Thomas Gore and Branson Dean, who came in as transfers in the current recruiting class. Whether he could make an immediate impact, who knows? But they're after him in the portal as well. And another guy that's out there is Stephon Wynn from Nebraska. He's a former Alabama signing, but he hasn't had a big impact to this point in college. And it remains to be seen how serious Miami will get with him. But Stephen, I'm sure you agree with me, because there's no doubt in my mind that you do, that it would be very useful for Miami to add a big defensive tackle here in the transfer portal going forward.
I think we've really seen throughout the spring, and really at the spring game, defensive tackle is where Miami needs help. The offensive line, I thought the offensive line took a lot of very positive steps forward, and I thought that was evident at the spring game that the O-line is improved, and it will look a lot better by the time that we actually get to the fall. But defensive tackle is where I have real concerns. Joshua Horton was the only high school defensive tackle signee that they had in the previous class. And then obviously they added Gore and Dean over the offseason. But I'm yet to see a guy who can really come in and just be an impactful stop guy, a guy who can just manhandle the point of attack in the center of that defense. Because whenever you look at defensive tackle, you're looking at a guy, or you're asking for a guy who can come in and be that anchor. You're asking for a guy who is willing to say, screw whatever stats I end up with. I'm just going to be a dog. I'm going to be an absolute menace for this offensive line. I'm going to make the offensive line's job hell. And don't get me wrong, I definitely think Gore and Dean have value. I think that they absolutely make the roster better. But I still see defensive tackle as one of those spots that's kind of a weakness. And now, don't get me wrong, I think Miami recognizes this, and I think that's a big reason why they're going after guys like Justin Scott and David Stone and all of these guys in the 2024 high school recruiting class. But I'm yet to kind of see that emerge as a theme in the transfer portal, where Miami says, yeah, we absolutely need to get a dog in the center of this defensive line. And that's what I want to see from the Hurricanes. I want a guy who they can lean on to say, yeah, this guy is going to do whatever he needs to do to stop this offensive line from getting a push up front. Remember, whenever you're asking someone to be a defensive tackle, you're not asking them to get into the backfield. You're not asking them to actually make tackles all the time necessarily. You're just asking a guy to stop the offensive line from getting up the field. And that's really what I want to see in this class. Can Miami, or in this transfer class, can Miami go out and get a guy who can just manhandle the point of attack?
Yeah, and I don't know that any of these guys is good enough to where we could project that they will manhandle anybody or anything. But they need more on the interior of the defensive line. There's no question about it. To me, Malone is the perfect fit for what they need. Hopefully they can fight off Ohio State and get him. We'll see what happens there with the defensive tackles. Now, so much has been made at linebacker about the impact that Francisco Mauigoa, the transfer from Washington State, made in spring practice. And it was very significant. I mean, he clearly was the best linebacker on the field the whole spring. So the question becomes, does Miami use one of its spots to go find another guy at linebacker? Wesley Bissainthe, to my eye, was not as far along this spring as you would like. I think he still has some work to do before you know that you can count on him play after play after play over the course of the entire season. A couple guys that they've been looking at, this kid out of App State, Jalen McLeod, kid out of North Texas, Larry Nixon. Are those guys good enough? I mean, Nixon had 104 tackles last season after having 70 the year before. That's a lot of tackles at any level of football. Can he come here and make a difference? I don't know. I'm not gonna predict that, but these are just options that are out there in the portal, with the caveat being the tight numbers. And then Miami does want to find at least one, if not two, cornerbacks. They're trying very, very hard to make Jaden Davis one of them. He started for a pretty bad Oklahoma defense last year. He had 44 tackles, only has one career interception. We're not going to call him a program changer, okay? He's not, but he is a local kid that can come home and play and fortify a cornerback position that you just can't have enough depth there, and you can't have enough competition there. And then another guy that I would just continue to keep an eye on is Traquan Fagans. He's leaving Alabama. We believe he will visit Miami here in the near future, and is very much on the radar for one of those slots coming out of transfer portal for the Hurricanes. So a lot to continue to follow here, Stephen, as the week goes forward. And we'll be doing that at CaneSport.com, not just in traditional recruiting, which is your baby, and you're diving yourself into almost every minute of every day, but also with the transfer portal. So stay tuned for new developments there. And again, all these updates are on the website this morning. All right. Just a ton of other stuff on the site as well. We have a Hot 11 today, which where we talk about the fresh faces coming into the program that are set to make a major impact on the 2023 Hurricanes. And we've been talking for years about the talent efficiencies that this program has had. Stephen, that was never more evident than in the NFL draft yet again this past weekend. Tyreek Stevenson, congrats to him. He went in the second round. Will Mallory got drafted. DJ Ivey got drafted late. But it's not what Miami should have or where Miami should be, not even close. And Stephen, as you look forward and as we covered the recruiting of this past class and see all these guys that are coming in, Hot 11 is a real deal thing, because there's going to be several of these guys that are going to make a contribution this season.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm pulling up the graphic that that On3 put on Twitter of how many picks every team had in the NFL draft. So Georgia and Alabama each had 10 picks. That's what you'd probably expect, is Georgia and Alabama. After that, you had Michigan, who had 9 picks. Beneath that, you had TCU, who had 8 picks and played for the national championship. Then Pitt really confused me. But Pitt, Ohio State, Clemson, Florida, Oregon, Penn State, and LSU each had 6 picks. And then at 5 picks had Auburn, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Maryland, South Carolina, Purdue, and Stanford. Miami is not included on that list. Miami has a development problem. We've seen Miami recruiting. Let's be honest, it wasn't necessarily elite.
It has had a development problem for sure.
Yeah, it
hopefully now with the changes that is being corrected, and we won't know that for a few more years, but certainly there has been a development problem.
It's probably going to take 2 years for us to be able to say, okay, Miami has their development. They either fix their development or this is still an issue. We're going to need to see if Mario Cristobal is going to be able to make Francis Mauigoa into a Penei Sewell type guy, like a lot of his high school coaches that he said he could. And quite frankly, a lot of people said, they think that he could ultimately end up being. Can Mauigoa end up being a first-round draft pick? Because that's certainly what the expectation is. And then with guys like, Ruben Bain, Jaden Wayne, can they make them draft picks more generally? Can they turn them into these dominant edge rushers who are able to control the ACC on the edge and turn them into these big time draft picks who are going in the higher rounds, like the second round, the third round, so forth and so on. Because we saw throughout the draft, 5 stars and 4 stars were for the most part, the guys who were being selected. Yeah, there were quite a few 3 stars. And yes, I'm fully aware of the stats of high school high school quarterback 3-star recruits who ultimately end up going to the NFL, and how different they are from 4-star and 5-star quarterbacks who end up going to the NFL and their draft selection, all of this stuff. But for now, let's focus on the other positions. Can they turn these other recruits into these draft picks that that all of these kids want to ultimately end up becoming? Because something that I found over and over and time again, whenever I talk to these kids, is they're saying, hey, I want to go to the place that's going to develop me the best. I want to go to a program that has a record of development. I mean, that's the thing that Jeremiah Smith keeps on citing whenever he talks about why he's committed to Ohio State right now and why he's not committed to Miami, because he has that belief in Brian Hartline that he will turn him into a first-round draft pick. A lot of kids, I hate to say it, but a lot of kids really do not care about the idea of playing for, whatever it is at Alabama, the crimson and white, or the orange and green at Miami, or the maize and blue at Michigan. They really do not care that much. They care about, hey, can you turn me into a first-round draft pick? Because the smartest of these kids are really understanding that the money they're not going to make is not in name, image, and likeness. It's in the contract that you're going to sign by being one of these high draft picks. It's going to be in those hopefully 20 to 30 to 40 million dollars that you're going to be able to sign, or that you're going to be able to get by being hopefully a top 10 pick. That's what these guys want to see. That's what Miami needs to do. Miami has a development problem. It's up to the staff to get it corrected.
All right. So Matt Shodell and I worked on this Hot 11 that I was talking about, and it was interesting. We had to try to rank them based on who we thought was going to make the biggest impact. And everyone's going to be shocked when they read this feature today, because they're going to be thinking that we probably would have picked Francis Maigoa as number 1. But you know what? We decided to shake it up, and we went with Matt Lee as the number 1 Hot 11 newcomer, because when you watch spring practice, it's hard for me to explain, but the impact that Matt Lee was making on the football field was so startling that, we just had to make him number 1. It's such a night and day difference from what Miami's had. Just his recognition of defenses, his ability to make calls at the line of scrimmage. We think that Matt Lee is going to just make an insane impact on the Miami offense this weekend. So we put him at number 1. We put Maigoa at number 2. We put Francisco Maigoa at number 3. And it was hard to figure out which one to put first. But since it looks like Francis is going to start at right tackle, we figured, all right, we'll go with the 5-star and throw him in there at number 2. But, certainly Javion Cohen at number 4 could have been in one of those higher spots. Devontae Brown, the cornerback, very impressive during spring practice. I really liked what I saw out of him. He's going to make a big impact. We had very high hopes for Mark Fletcher this season, Ray Joseph, Reuben Bain, Branson Dean, because he didn't play in the spring game, is a guy that nobody's thinking of. But from what I've seen and also heard, he's got a real chance to start this next season. He will be in a knockdown dragout competition with Jared Harrison Hunt in training camp to start opposite Leonard Taylor. And so that right there is 9 newcomers that it looks like will make major contributions at the minimum. And that's before you get into like the Robbie Washingtons of the world and Samson Okinola and some of these other guys who will also be given an opportunity to help right away. And even like some of the guys like Malik Bryant, I think you're going to see on special teams quite a bit. You're certainly going to see Ray Joseph on special teams quite a bit. So this is a big recruiting class for Miami. And I don't think they're going to delay, letting these guys go and make an impact. So we've got that feature on the website today. Make sure you check that out. All right, let me move on because there's just so many other things, and I'm not going to try to talk about them all on this show. You guys can spend some time on the website this morning. There's a ton of, if you weren't on the site over the weekend, there's a ton from the weekend. There's a lot more new stuff coming up today. We have been averaging, I think, somewhere around 10 stories a day at CaneSport.com. So we are trying to do our part to give you guys your off-season fix and let you stay on top of what's going on in the program. We talk about realistic expectations for the Miami offense and defense. That's something for you guys to check out. We have been breaking down the top 5 breakout players for this coming season, and we're counting them down. So you can check those features out on the website as well. Coverage from the weekend baseball series against Louisville, that's on the website. And of course, a ton of recruiting. And Stephen, that's where you come in, obviously, quite a bit. And let's just talk in general for a minute. After a week of the Miami coaches being on the road, you've had a chance to talk to a lot of the coaches about those school visits. How's Miami being received out there on the recruiting trail as they begin their spring school visits and evaluations?
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm seeing is Miami, and this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, but Miami really being intent on building these relationships with high school coaches. That's a lot of what we saw tight ends coach Cody Waddell doing while he was out in Georgia. We saw Shannon Dawson doing it while he was in both Georgia and Kentucky as well. And these coaches more generally just wanting to at the very least, show their face, and for the kid to or for these recruits to be able to acknowledge, hey, I saw him here at my practice. Now, these coaches aren't allowed to, actually sit down and formally meet and talk to recruits and all this stuff while they're on the road during the evaluation period. That would be an NCAA violation. But it is worthwhile. And I talked to Judd Anderson, Miami's quarterback commit, about this. It was worthwhile for him to be able to be working out and for him to see Shannon Dawson on the other side of the field, just watching him sit back and throw. That was something that meant something to him. We saw the same thing with Kylan Fox, 4-star tight end, Miami's recruiting out of Georgia, who Cody Waddell dropped in really early on last week to be able to meet with his coach. I believe Kylan was able to just kind of see him passing in the hallway. But it means a lot for these guys to be, kind of checked up on at their school, and for these kids to be able to say, hey, Miami values me enough that they want to actually, meet with my coach and ask, hey, what's this kid like in the classroom? What's he like as a player? What's he like to coach? How does he interact with his teammates? How does he interact with his teammates? Is he hot-headed? How does he react when he's losing? How does he react when he's winning? How does he react when he's getting blown out? Really all these really character traits that you're looking for. I think something that we're finding a lot is with a lot of these recruits, Miami understands more or less what you're getting, what they're looking for talent-wise in these prospects. They know how well these guys can catch, run, block, all of this different stuff. But what they're really looking to find out is, what are these guys like as players? What are they like as human beings? And what are they like to coach? Are these guys who you would want to have in your locker room? I remember something that Gus Malzahn at Auburn used to do. I remember hearing this story. Whenever he was recruiting guys, he used to have players hang around he used to have his prospective recruits hang around his current players. And then he would ask his players, hey, is this a guy who you would hang out with? Is this a guy you would want to be around? And it looks to me like this is a lot of what Miami is trying to get out of getting out on these visits, is how good of a guy would this be to have in our locker room? And so far to me, it seemed like they're pretty much being able to reaffirm there are already suspected beliefs out of a lot of these guys. We definitely saw that with Joseph Ionata, or Josiah Nada, three-star offensive tackle who they are recruiting at center out of Cavalry Christian out in Clearwater. Alex Mirabal, it seemed like he was pretty impressed with him from what I was able to speak with his head coach about. Same with Kylan Fox, and same with Judd Anderson. It seems like they're really being able to reaffirm all the stuff that they're hoping to see both in these recruits and in these commits. And so that's something that I would definitely expect them to continue to do while they get on the road. Now, obviously, there are some offers that we're seeing come in where coaches are offering these recruits over the phone or something like that after they're able to evaluate them at their school. And I think that that's something that we'll probably continue to see as coaches continue to make physical evaluations of these recruits. But I think we're seeing a lot of character evaluations as well.
Yeah. And, I got to, take a shot at the NCAA a little bit, because watching these coaches make these evaluation visits and not being able to talk to the kids every spring, it just gets me so annoyed. Like, it's such overreaching legislation. I mean, like, why shouldn't coaches be able to talk to the kids when they're at the schools? Why do they just have to wave from the corner of the practice field, or whatever the crazy stuff, or accidentally bump into them in the hallway, or the crazy kind of stuff that goes on in recruiting? It's so stupid. And we've come so far in so many other things with NIL and transfer rules and things like that. It's time for the NCAA to get rid of this evaluation rule that says when coaches are visiting in the spring, they're only allowed to talk to the coaches, not the players. I mean, it's beyond silly. But we will continue, because this is going to be going on for a few more weeks now. We will continue to have nonstop coverage on as many of these visits that we can find out about, quite frankly, as time goes forward. You see that calendar over Steven's right shoulder over there on his refrigerator. That calendar says recruiting calls every day for the next month. So we'll have tons of coverage on all these things that are going on right now, as well as continuing to monitor the coming and goings in the transfer portal, those visits. There is going to be a lot going on here over the next month. So stay tuned for that. That's going to do it for today for Good Morning CaneSport. If you like this show, like our YouTube channel, hit your subscribe button, hit your like button. It helps us with the algorithms at YouTube and growing our audience. And more so than anything, if you are not yet a subscriber to CaneSport.com, please come join our website. It means a lot to us. Your subscriptions allow us to do what we do every single day. And like in the case of Steven, make a lot of phone calls every single day. So for Stephen Wagner, I'm Gary Ferman. Thank you so much for joining us once again this morning, everybody. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.